Good evening and welcome to this edition of DeFacto Review, a weekly roundup of the biggest stories shaping Mongolia. Here with us tonight is our guest commenter, Mr. Darshant, and my name is Ditko. We're live on Facebook at V Television. We want to hear your thoughts, so send us your comments on Twitter with #jargat_DeFacto. Coming up on the program. The 2019 state budget draft was submitted to Parliament. The Independent Agency Against Corruption is currently investigating a case pertaining to Just Group. Within the last week, the turak has significantly depreciated. So moving to our first topic of the night is the 2019 state budget, which was submitted to Parliament. In it, revenue is projected to increase by 800 billion and expenditures by 600 billion, leaving the budget deficit to be 1.9 billion, around 5.4% of GDP. So could you please elaborate on some of the key features of this 2019 state budget?
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. So first of all, we are expecting a very long discussion at the Parliament, and by budget law we have to have a discussion in the autumn session, and the deadline is December 1st. So far I don't have a very detailed data and information, but based on my data, I would be happy to give you some feedbacks. So first of all, we do have an IMF program. And the good thing is that we are somehow trying to keep a fiscal discipline. And the very important thing is like strengthening fiscal position, by achieving the fiscal sustainability is very important, And I think the first remark on this budget for 2019 is that the discipline, the fiscal discipline, could be restored, And if you look at some data, the budget deficit is projected at the rate of 5.4% of GDP for 2019. And the expected deficit in this year is about 8%. The last year it was 9.5%. So you see this the gradual decline in the budget deficit is a good indicator. And as we know that we do have the fiscal sustainability law, and we do have also some sort of special requirement for the fiscal indicators. And by these indicators, like for example, the fiscal deficit for next year has to be lower than 6.9%. So the projection is 5.4%, which is good result. And the government debt is projected at the rate of 55.3% for next year. In terms of NPV, so 55.3% of GDP is also a good result compared with this indicator reflected in this fiscal sustainability law. So the threshold is 75%. So somehow our figures look good. And also one of the interesting thing I found out in the budget is like the finance ministry stated that the government is trying to provide scholarship programs for the individuals who are looking for some lessons in vocational training center. So every month the 100,000 will be given, So I believe this is a good initiative. But even though this the fiscal deficit is low, but still the budget expenditure side is increasing, in line with the budget revenue. So I have some concern on it, and once Parliament has a discussion, will have a discussion on it, and I could give a more clear view on it.
And how do you see the debt issue being reflected in this budget?
the debt. Well, the debt was the major concern for the Mongolians and by the fund as well, the IMF. And I think I would say that this government is doing a good job on dealing with the debt, both international debt as well as local debt. So I was informed that debt repayment in next year is reduced by 285 billion Turks. And compared with the last year, it has been decreased by 25%. It's a good indicator. And it seems that the statement made by the finance minister last Friday, I noticed that the government has no intention to issue a government bond in international market. So they are trying to avoid by having a kind of commercial loans from abroad. And also, he also mentioned that he is also avoiding to issue the local debt as well, because local debt has been a big amount and given a very big pressure on the budget. And I think this is also good intention. And I was informed that the authorities are planning to finance 1.1 trillion Mongolian tugri for the debt repayment for next year, which has been reduced substantially.
And how do you see the implementation of the new tax laws affecting the economy?
Right, good question. So the tax law, the tax package law has been introduced. And some of the laws have been passed by the spring session, and still some more expecting to be approved by the parliament for this session, especially this corporate income tax and the general tax. So, for example, this corporate income tax is giving some opportunity for the SMEs and for small business people that if the tax law is approved by the parliament, then they will be able to be taxed by 1% for their income. So it's good. And also the expectation I have is like we need to strengthen the tax office in Mongolia. And all this IT-based technology need to be improved. And I was informed that some international financial institutions like IMF and World Bank is providing some assistance to them. And since the budget has been submitted, and what I understood is that they're expecting some capital inflow next year, and that's why they are trying to give more freedom or more good environment for the international investors. And that kind of the clauses or conditions have been reflected in the tax proposal that I assume, and that would be good.
And moving on to our second topic of the night, 5 people are currently under investigation in relation to the loan received from Standard Bank for the Erdenet Mining Corporation. So last week, the courts ruled that nationalizing the Erdenet mine was unconstitutional. It is illegal, and ruled in favor of the Mongolian Copper Corporation. And this week, the former director of Erdenet Mining Corporation is being investigated. So what exactly is happening to Erdenet?
Well, I'm an economist, so in my understanding, the property dispute over Erdenet Mining Corporation between the government and the Mongolian Copper Corporation has been dragged on for 2 years, right? Since 2016. And as we all know, that Parliament made the decision and they provided the guidance to the government, and the government issued the 7th resolution, right? And on September 19th, the government lost the case in the Supreme Court for the second time. And now MCC is demanding the government to fulfill the court's decision and let the MC be able to operate normally. As an economist, I do support my active private sector engagement in the economy, but we do have a law, and the government of Mongolia is the state. We have to build our state, and that's why everybody has to follow our law and do have respect for that. Right? So, in this regard, I think somehow the issue needs to be solved, and I would urge the authorities, the government, to sit on the negotiation table with this private sector company to have a consensus on it, and then maybe we should start this process again, because at the end, this privatization should be done publicly often, and the technology has been developed so far. That's why all this the privatization process needs to be more transparent, and we should use the platform of Mongolia Stock Exchange or some IT-based program to privatize this the Mongolian property, Mongolian available assets to the people of Mongolia and to the corporates of Mongolia, equally. And this is my concern. And somehow the process has to end. And in my understanding, this is a joint company and funded by the country of two countries, Russia and Mongolia. And we do have international treaty between the countries, right? And somehow the treaties have been broken, and we need to restore and follow up with the authorities of the Russia, and then to come up with a good approach, or good, how to say, the legal papers,
Yeah. And because we're a little bit short on time this week, let's move on to our third topic. So the dollar has appreciated within the last week from 2,260 to 2,560. So why is the tuguruk depreciating?
Well, mainly there are two reasons, and this you see this world economy is changed, and the IMF is issuing this world economic outlook, and by that outlook, that world economy will be, the growth of the world economy will be reduced by 0.2% next year, and there is a trade war between US and China, and that also somehow impacting the other countries' outcome. And also the policy rate of US has been increased since 2015. The Fed has announced that lately in September to increase this policy rate up to 2.25, and we expect further increase, 2.5% in this December, and 3% in next year. So there is a policy rate hike, we see it. As a result, this all the currencies, including our currency, and Russian currency, and Chinese currency, all the currencies are depreciating against the USD. And this is one of the factors. But there is other factors more. I do have some concern that domestic policy is more influencing on this depreciation of tuguruk. And if you look at these numbers, like the international reserve with the central bank is very normal. It's 3 billion USD, and foreign trade looks good. It seems like our commodity price will be more stable in the upcoming years. In this case, I don't see some sort of difficulty in the BOP, right? But what happened? Why the 100 tool the hikes has happened in just 1 week, you know?
Yeah.
And this is because some banks, PFIs, actually, they do have some concern. They believe maybe something would happen in next year, and that's why they think like it's better to reserve the USD, and in order to prepare the next shock, you know. But I would say that, hey, look, this banks, please, you know, look at the numbers and look at the macro data, and don't be in rush. And there is nothing has happened so far, and there is no need to limit this forex exchange sales. And also, if something happens, like if we keep increasing if the Mongolian tool keeps depreciating more, then there will be risk behind this. Like all tool deposit holders may shift their holdings to the USD deposits, and that would be a big risk behind it. And that's why, in this regard, I would really ask and urge the Bank of Mongolia to make a decisive actions. You know, if there is a necessary, the administrative action need to be taken in place.
Well, thank you for joining us this week. So this concludes our program for this week. Please join us next week at the same time for another weekly roundup of the biggest stories shaping Mongolia. Good night.